fall, I knew that she would not give me leave to go, but I felt I must go. Whenever I carried the children's lunch to school, I ran around and went to hear the teachers. So that act of carving out time, the master's time, to go to hear the preacher can be seen as an act of rebellion. Mary Prince also got married. And slaves were not supposed to be married, or not without the permission of their masters. And slaves did get married. People like the Quakers, who kept slaves but felt that they should treat them humanely, taught them Christianity, and allowed them to marry. But generally speaking, commodities, chattel, should not get married. But Mary Prince met a free man who wanted to marry her. And she said, we were joining marriage about Christmas 1826 in the Moravian chapel. We could not be married in the English church. English marriage is not allowed to slaves, and no free man may marry a slave woman. But she did. She was slave, he was free, and they got married. So she was going against established rule. And when her master and mistress heard, they were very upset. And she said that, you know, our husband seemed to have been well enough off to purchase her freedom, but the mistress especially refused to sell her, though she sold several other slaves. It's like she said, who dare you to go and get married without my permission? But in time, they gave in and allowed her husband to live on the property with her. So she got her way, married woman. We sometimes overlook these type of resistance, but they help to quietly undermine the system by these men and women asserting that they had a personality. They were human beings, not merely chattel. This was the principle on which slavery was built, the inferiority of blacks and the fact that they were not human beings, no personality, unless it was for criminal acts. Now, black men and women were brought to the Caribbean to be laborers. And if they were going to undermine the system, that is one area which they must target. They had to resist work. They had a key part of resistance as it would get to the very fabric of slave society, why they were there in the first place. The whites misused slave labor. I'm sure you'd have learned that, and this is true from the early literature, that slavery was a very profitable enterprise. But if you look at it closely, it was also not so profitable, or less profitable than it could have been, because of the misuse of labor, the inefficient use of labor by the planter class. Why do I say that? Many slaves were not put to productive use. A large number were placed in the great house, doing domestic chores that would not bring an income to the plantation. But also that those that were put to productive work were often prevented from doing effective work in this area because they were so abused. They were maimed, and so it was difficult for them to work as hard as they could have if they were healthy and treated well. So it's as if the planters were short-sighted about this. But while the planters did not make the most efficient use of their laborers, the laborers themselves also undermined the work of the plantation. The planters got diminishing return because of the use of the whip. But in time, the people would not work without the use of the whip, right? Counterproductive. They worked slowly. They pretended that they didn't, especially new arrivals, would pretend that they didn't know what to do, right? They were ignorant of what was required of them, and they even went as far as to use buildings to work. I think it is Matthew who tells the story of a woman who nothing they did could get her to work. She just refused to work on the planter's plantation. But she worked very hard on her plot of land. So it's not that she couldn't work, it's just that she's saying, I am not working for you. And nothing they did would get her to work. She was that stubborn, right? So, in addition to their stubbornness, women were uniquely placed, especially those of childbearing age, to resist work. They use their monthly cycle as excuse not to work. Some of you girls still do that for school, don't they? Especially when it's day for physical education. And they use their child care responsibilities as well to say, you know, it is said that African women took a long time to wean their children. It was said to be a form of birth control. As long as you are breastfeeding, you can't get pregnant. I don't know if it's true biologically. I'm just saying what it is. But they said they would extend this to avoid work, right? So because they would get time off to go and breastfeed and so on. Now, so if you read the writings of the period of slavery, you'll get the sense that white people thought blacks were lazy. It became almost to be seen as part of their character. But the truth is, laziness was a response to slavery, and the more astute white person would recognize that, right? Because if they were lazy, these people, these persons, including women, not just men, who work up to 18 hours a day during crop time, how come they found time to work their own provision grounds and did it well that they have surplus to sell in the Sunday market? And they said women were very successful. They were at the base. They were central to developing the internal marketing system, right? So they are finding time to work after working in the fields and in the factories to work their plantation, their own plots, sorry. Women excel in this area. They couldn't be lazy. It's just their way of saying, I am not working, I'm not using up all my energies for you, right? I am going to do my own thing. Another area of resistance that the women use, and again, is not sometimes something that we spend a lot of time looking at, and as I mentioned earlier, it's very important for you to read this because it is part of the template that she has set up for us to examine resistance. She calls it the tongue of the woman. She said women were just quarrelsome. Probably that is what they say about us women. We nag. It's probably true. I don't know if we nag more than men, we just do it in a different way. But they were seen as very quarrelsome. And they insisted on their way. And where there were provisions for them to get redress for wrongs, they made use of it. So they'll go to court if necessary to get their rights. But not only that, one woman who felt wrong would go to court. Probably the whole gang would decide we are going with her. So this insistence, and probably because women network, they stay together, and in slavery networking was very strong among women. They went together. So they disrupted the life of the plantation, and a given day when one woman may have started to gripe in the morning about something that was wrong and insist they are going to appeal to the court. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. And they would have if they lost, they would be punished for wasting the time. But that didn't stop them from doing it anyway. The historians refer to this as petticoat rebellion, as I mentioned earlier. They answered back to the point where they were considered insolent. Now, part of the reason why women were probably so good at this answering back and this arguing is because they knew white men liked them very much. And some of the overseers and persons who supervised them would later in the night be calling them and taking them into their own cottages. So, you know, they used that, you know. In other words, you can't